Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Zoom. So yeah, I'm not going to spend any further time, but as is normal in these conversations, it's an interactive session amongst all of the speakers, all three today. But there will be time before we finish in about an hour's time for plenty of questions and answers. And you can use the chat facility if you like to raise issues, and I'll try and moderate as best I can. So without further ado, I'd just like to welcome our three speakers for today's webinar about shared sense of place, case studies of intercultural design from Australia. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. That was great. A lovely introduction. As the process that we would normally go through, this is Shaneen Fantin speaking at the moment, is that it's very important when we're working in Australia with First Nations peoples and traditional owners that there is an acknowledgement before we start our meeting. And we've got Bumi, Uncle Peter Hyde here tonight, who is one of the most senior traditional owners of the Gimuy Walubara Yidinji people of the Cairns area in far north Queensland, and who's a good friend and colleague of mine. And he's going to do an acknowledgement and welcome this evening, and then he's going to be part of the conversation with us. So, Uncle, would you like to do the welcome acknowledgement?
So, I think it's about 7 o'clock now.
Yeah.
About 7 o'clock, and I'll take Shaneen for bringing me out to give a welcoming as an elder of the Gimuy Walubara Yidinji people. So, as an elder, we say Bilangada. Bilangada in our language, we welcome you. We welcome you to country. And Uncle, thank you for having me here to show you myself, and I'm glad to be with you lot too. So I gave Karen there, I gave Kelly a language named Wungu. Wungu means rainbow. So now I'm with the architect here, Shaneen, with the Potter. So Potter architect. So up here with Shaneen, I'm an uncle like a bridge to her. So wherever Shaneen goes, she can say my name. She's going to Lockhart. I know a lot of people up Lockhart or where Kelly goes, or even when you come over Australia, you come and see us, you know, in that way. So when they go to Yarrabah, but being with you a lot, this is the first time I've seen these states. So when they built that hospital over there, I said to Shaneen, I said, I'm getting healed outside. So they're going inside, and you know, it's a very good feeling and good seeing that something different, you know, in my way, you know, and as a traditional owner, you know.
Thank you, Uncle. Thank you. Yeah. Uncle, Uncle's referring to one of the projects we're going to talk about tonight as part of the conversation we're having. And the word that he used just then, which is the important one, well, many important words, but is the word bridge, that he's a bridge to us. And that anywhere in Queensland that we can go, that we can talk about our relationship with Uncle. And because he is such a senior man and an important man, and his connections to country, that we would be safe and welcome. Yeah. Did you want to say anything more before Kelly starts the next one? Kelly, go. Okay. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Uncle, and thanks, Shaneen. And I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands where I'm speaking from today in Brisbane, the Yarrabah and Turrbal people, and acknowledge their ancestors past, present and emerging, and their continuing connections to country here in Brisbane, and especially all the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who've helped me to do my research and become friends and colleagues along the way, including Uncle Peter, who's been down to visit me in the last year and got to know my family. And that's why we're talking today about country. It's good that Shaneen mentioned this bridge. I use this, she doesn't mean a literal bridge, but I'm showing a picture of, this is a bridge over the Brunswick River in Bundjalung country in 2019. And it helps us talk about country, because sometimes when we think about country, this very special meaning of country in Aboriginal Australia, it's easy to think that it might just be about the ground or the land, and that it might also be very remote from contemporary life. But it's all of the nation, and it's many nations. And Shaneen picked out a really fantastic quote from Deborah Bird Rose that says, country is a living entity with a yesterday, today, tomorrow, with a consciousness and a will toward life. Country is multidimensional. It consists of people, animals, plants, dreaming, underground earth, soils, minerals and waters, surface water and air. There is sea country and land country. In some areas, people talk about sky country. Country has origins and a future. It exists both in and through times. And so it's really similar to what a lot of people listening today might think of as the multifaceted idea of place. But of course, it's really more important than that, because it's deeply spiritual, and it's not optional. It's serious and life-defining. And we're going to hear from Uncle about that today. One of the important things is that people like Shaneen and I, the non-Indigenous people of Australia, we're on these countries, but we can't speak for country. That is a really important role that can only be done by the traditional owners of the country, as we heard from Uncle Peter today. And maybe, Shaneen, you want to start by explaining this map a little bit and what all these colours mean and what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, my understanding of this, Kelly, is that this is the Australian Institute of Torres Strait Islander and Indigenous Studies IATSIS map, languages map of Australia. So, well, Uncle, you can probably talk to this much better than I can, but at the time of colonisation, there are hundreds and hundreds of language groups in Australia. And there are still hundreds of language groups in Australia, even though some of them are, there's been some kind of cultural genocide. But you still have some of your language. But you can see the diversity and the range of all the different languages on the map. There's many, many people there. And languages were different, weren't they, Uncle? Yeah.
Shaneen, you just need to face the mic when you talk, otherwise you drop out. So.
Yeah. So it's just a reminder for me when I look at this map of all the different Indigenous First Nation nations across Australia, and that, you know, if we travel 60 kilometres south of Cairns, we've moved into a different nation, you know, and a different people's country. And that within the Gimuy region, there are 8 clan groups within that region. And Uncle, do you want to talk about mention where your mother's from on that map? I know that we can't point, but it's up towards the Gulf country, Kelly, if you can use a pointer. Yeah, over in yeah, Cloncurry.
And
up here.
Come back to Atherton Way in Cairns. Yeah?
Then to Atherton Way in Cairns.
Up here.
And your mother walked from Cloncurry to Cairns, didn't she?
Mum walked from there. That's a young kid, they walked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the wagon came along and they jumped on and jumped off. And so Mum came all the way from Cloncurry to Junior Creek, Richmond, and Unison.
Unison, Richmond, Julia Creek.
Down here.
Lynn Highway. So you got in Townsville, you go to Lynn Highway and you came out to Atherton Way.
Up to here.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so he has family connections not only in his father's cultural area, which is the Gimuy Nation, but all through his grandparents, his mother's parents, his father's parents on both sides. And so Uncle's network of relationships spans across many different nations when you begin to look at the whole of his family. Yeah. This is just a little map of where the practice that I work in. I'm Director of People-Oriented Design, where we've done projects. And so there's a big smattering across Australia. The big orange one towards the top of Queensland is where we are at the moment. but I wanted to show the audience so that they understand that I think one of the reasons why we have such a strong relationship with community and the people that we're working with is because of the range of Australia that we've worked on and our own connections to place and country when we do that work.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to show a video because we weren't sure that Uncle was going to be able to join us. And we're going to use this video to then unpack some of the themes he talks about and explain how Shaneen and her practice use this in their design.
My name is Peter Hyde, but my real name is Bumi, means thunder. And I'm a traditional owner of Cairns. And Cairns is really named Gimuy. Today that we see Gurriny, they built a clinic there, and I'm proud of Belinda and Shaneen for what they've done for us. And that's very good. They've been around Aboriginal people most of their life. As you see, there's some paintings at the back of me here. Like now, today, like, I talked to about 150 doctors. They came from around the world. They came to Cairns, and the heading was about pain. And it's really about us, how we see Aboriginal people in Australia. We never had it, on the table. We're getting it now. We want to see a change in the community by seeing a different picture, like Gurriny now. We're going to see a nice hospital, shops, but like for hospital, seems to be a main thing there where we all go up and check ourselves out. Before, in the time like we was in there, you go to a hospital, you can smell all these stuff. As you're sitting down on the brandy, and just frightening us, and smell all these smells. But today, it's very good. So the doctor really know how we go on in life. They sit you down and they tell you about your life, what's wrong with you, and give you a good talk about what it's going to do to your body and take it steady. So I see this the change there, but I've never been in other communities. Hard to go south for Yarrabah. I want to see like the people pull together a team, and as one, and go out hunting and seeing a hospital like that, clinic. That's very good for me. For people that come through, like all you young people now, and I'm proud of them. We say put the right colour back, and we see this design of Philomene there, my daughter there. She done the design for Fiona, cut the ribbon there, traditional owners there, and ate the strawberry to keep dancing. Put something back in the community, Yes.
Sorry, Uncle, that's probably really terrible having to watch yourself. The first thing you say is, my real name is Bumi. It means thunder. Can you tell us about how names aren't just given to you randomly? They really mean something about places too.
Yeah. See, like now we got these names that we got now, like Shaneen, Michael, Peter. But them named, like, see, my granddad, he was named Boa, means rock wallaby. But they was christened him as Charlie Hyde. Dad was named Richard, so they named Bumi. I'm Bumi, so they gave me name Peter. So when we go out camping or hunting, and like the weather, when we smell that wind. See, today we say, oh, the wind coming there. Or we used to we smell the wind, And we say, oh, it might be no good weather soon, you know. So then you maybe an hour after you see the cloud come out, and we know there's something gonna happen, then like a cyclone, or like a good weather. We never had a compass or anything like that. We've been told by our seeing, we see it, you know. Like we saw it's going to be good weather. So we look around, if not, we can feel it with our hand too, you know. So when thunder come, that name came to Dad, you know, and Dad, and like that bow at us, he got that kangaroo to feed the family, you know, feed the tribe, you know, and keep that skin for himself and share that warmth with the tribe too. So they got a lot of that for clothes and that. So this sort of thing with us, that Aboriginal thing, that we was in the Walmart that I made in Brisbane there, but also we had a rock. We went under a rock, you know, some rock that's shaped like that.
Yeah.
We stayed. But coming back to our weather, like maybe a little bit of a lot of clean, but we didn't have a wireless or anything. We knew what gonna happen, you know, like.
Do you know why your mother
Yep.
called you Bumi? Or your dad called you Bumi?
Shaneen can't hear you.
Sorry. Yeah.
So when he called me Bumi, so like when I'm in a crowd, I can give you language name. So when I seen Kelly standing up like that, I said, "Oh, Wungu." So we see too. We can see that that's your name suits you. You know that. You know, and you, if not, you can, you know, the fish that you can catch any fish, or this corroboree dance in you. You know that.
Yeah.
These things happen from them. You know.
Yeah. So it's connecting you to country, right? So it's part of your identity, that thunder.
The thunder, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if you know Uncle Peter, when you get to know him, his name is perfect for him because he's very, in real life, he's very tall and he's very strong and he's very outgoing. And so he's not like a bad thunder though. When we meet you, you're a positive thunder, you know, and his parents must have seen that.
Yeah.
Right.
Fantastic.
And that's, you go. Sorry.
And that, sorry, I know, we've got so many things to talk about. I also noticed that when you started your talk and you said, I'm a traditional owner of the Cairns region, you gave your shield a little shake as if that was a way of showing that you were really from that area. Can you tell us what's on the shield, what the design means?
That design on the shield here, that one here, that's where Mum and Dad, they're dancing there.
Mm-hmm.
So that you part, we sitting down there.
Yep.
Me and brother and sister, we sitting there, they dancing for us.
Yep.
So that color white, that's a mudgra. We paint up, and that's what's our medicine. One mum had it in a gumball at work, so she had to eat some of that white clay to bring us out. And so today you and I got doctors now, and ambulance. So that's the paint we used to grade. That's that bark tree. And that little part in there, that's our home, the Bulma.
The home is the part of the shield that sticks up or stands out. And rainforest shields have traditionally been made in Far North Queensland forever. And these are more contemporary ones that Uncle has made over the last few years based on more traditional designs, and he's made many of them. So, and he's very and they're all about country and place, and they're protective too, aren't they?
Now this is a slide. Sorry, am I going too fast?
That's good. You're right.
So I wanted to show this, ask you about this, because this is a Frontier Wars ceremony in Cairns, and the using smoke and having everyone together there. That's another kind of activity that happens on country, isn't it?
Yeah. So we do that welcoming and the ceremony dance. It's about on land, and that's a healing thing. It's a healing dance that we're the custodian of the land. And when we do this ceremony smoke, that's another healing that we take on too, the smoking. So like, it takes all the things away, all the bad stuff, you know. You know, when we say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. So, but this is powerful for the tribe, you know. So we cleanse ourselves. We can have a part in that, but when we do a ceremony thing like that, it goes right through us and cleanse us this way. What we do, the dance and the ceremony, you know.
And what do you burn, Uncle, when you?
When we bend that bark, and we get that wattle scent. So when we bend, it just the smell come out. You know, like we smell Vicks or something. It goes up
Yeah.
to you. So it cleans you right out. As we see one fellow there now, I'm over there. So that's our ceremony day.
Fantastic. We're going to talk now a bit more about Gurriny now. And I think perhaps we might start by going a bit backwards and talking about you two. And maybe Shaneen, you want to explain how you two have a strong relationship, and not just with Uncle, but with other traditional owners in your region, and how that helps you get started with design.
Sure, I can do that. So my family has lived in the same area of Far North Queensland since the 1920s. So it'll be coming up to 100 years soon. We're from Italian migrant sugarcane farming families who came to Australia after the First World War. And this is the youth of Australia. We were the third non-Indigenous family to live on the land that we call our farm. The first non-Indigenous family was there in about 1887. So that's the recentness of it. So I met Uncle about 10 years ago at a meeting for an Aboriginal Land Trust. And interestingly, he growled, we call this term growling. He growled me at the meeting and asked me who I was and what right I had to be there and what I was going to contribute. And then we ended up, after that work that I did, being very good friends. And we also worked out that through other members of my family had worked on Uncle Peter's native title claim since the 1990s. So there's a strong family connection between my family and the Gimuy Walubara Yidinji people. That goes back, that goes back a couple of easily 30 years or more. Uncle also, we have this kind of connection to a very micro area of the region. So Uncle lived in many places growing up, but he spent a lot of time working on farms in the between the 50s and the 70s. He didn't work on our particular farm, but he lived on farms and worked on farms nearby. And so we have a lot of connection to do with the landscape, the country, the geography, the places, where people live, where they move to, who used to swim in what creek, how we used to get to school, how he used to get to school, how I got to school, how the colonial families and the Indigenous families kind of overlapped in this same piece of geography. And as I get older, I find it, really interesting. And, I'm acutely aware that I'm sitting on a farm that is on the southern end of Uncle Peter's traditional lands. And it has been for forever, for thousands of years, and we've been here for 100 years. That seems like a long time to me, but it really is nothing compared to how long your family has been here. So, and I'm very grateful to Uncle because he works with us in different projects and he teaches us a lot all of the time. And I hope that he feels like we can give something back to you, you know, because you give so much to us.
And Shaneen, I suppose I don't want to, I know we don't have heaps of time left actually, but how do you think the relationship with not just Uncle Peter, but with many other Aboriginal people affects your ability to do your work? Like, why is it important to have these ongoing relationships?
Yeah. So it's really, well, some architects don't have them and they're not particularly interested in them, Kel. So I guess for us, because I grew up in this region and on land, you know, and in the landscape and on a farm, I've always had an interest in local ecology and landscape and environment, which then translates into, when you form relationships with Indigenous people, understanding the country. And so the relationships we build around preserving ecology and preserving environment and looking after community then translate into, I guess, project work and working with people to make better places for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the country. And that's one of the things that in our practice we're really passionate about. And, you know, as trying to facilitate knowledge across to different cultural bases so we can bring them together to make better places, you know, and to embed this incredibly rich history and sense of place, you know, if we call it that, into built things, whether they're gardens or, you know, buildings, you know, so.
Yeah, and I guess that's why in the video, Uncle says, I'm proud of Belinda and Shaneen and what they've done. They've been around Aboriginal people most of their lives. So I think what you're trying to say there is that there's a shared understanding there, and that allows you to work together. And that's a really important aspect. Building trust over a long period of time. It's not just coming in to do a project then leaving.
No. And that's, you can't do that. And that's where relationships will come undone and crack apart. There must be continuity and the strength of the relationship to do the work properly. Yeah.
Now this is I'm showing our former Prime Minister Tony Abbott, and that's because he, in 2015, as you can see there, he said that remote communities are a lifestyle choice, and that Aboriginal people's communities could be shut down because they were not financially viable. And that's what they were planning to do, cut off services to remote Aboriginal communities in Western Australia. And so this idea of connection to country as a given is certainly embedded in Aboriginal people's culture, but it's not necessarily embedded in government policy. And so that's a big challenge. And so when Uncle said things like, we haven't always had this, meaning the health centre, they haven't always had the investment in their communities to allow them to stay on country, to live where they want to live, where they've got connections. It hasn't always happened. So it's really, we're really only emerging into an era now where this is becoming more common and there is investment, and it really takes a lot of work by local people to make sure that happens, because this wasn't very long ago that people were really threatening to shut down a lot of communities. I thought it was so interesting what Uncle said about smells and hospitals. And I think I wanted to show this image. This is actually not from Queensland. This is from Western Australia. This is a lock hospital. And a lot of Aboriginal people were put in lock hospitals for various diseases, ostensibly for their protection. But of course, they were rife with abuse and lack of care. And there was a huge death rate, and a lot of people never return from these kinds of places. So they're very sad part of history. And this is why when something like this kind of hospital, it's not actually very far removed, and the smells and association, all those place qualities that we might think about in abstract terms in our research, they're very strong reminders for Aboriginal people about the kinds of history that they've been forced to endure, and as we see is ongoing. So that's why this Gurriny Health Centre is a really, really big deal. It's not just about it being in the right place and having a nice design. It's got a lot of other things happening.
Okay.
So there's a few photos there. Maybe you want to talk through them, Shaneen?
Sure. And are there more after these two, Kelly? Because it might be.
There's Philomena, and we can talk a bit more about the facade design. And then we can.
Okay. So
another time.
If you flip back a couple of slides, there was one of the front. Is there one of the front? So the Gurriny Yealamucka Health Wellbeing Centre, that one, yeah, is run by, importantly, an Aboriginal health organisation that was set up in the 80s, and it runs in parallel to the state government provided health facility in the community called Yarrabah. And we were lucky enough to win the job to be able to redevelop that site. They were working out of dongas, that's an Australian term for old transportable buildings, and they got money to build themselves a purpose-built facility. When we had meetings with the client and the senior management team, and also some elders from Yarrabah and some community members, they talked about the name of their centre is Gurriny Yealamucka, which means good healing water. All right. And they talked about the importance of their model of care and their connection to country and Yarrabah as a place, and all of the healing waters that are around Yarrabah. And that importance of that narrative and the connection to the landscape there. And so when we worked collaboratively with a range of different community groups and organisations, as well as with Gurriny, to develop a functional brief that still provided allied health and clinical kind of spaces, but in a completely different kind of form that was non-institutional, right? And so the building inside, this is the front to the street. It's in a very tight urban space, and it has a kind of courtyard that cracks open through the middle of it into the back of the space. And so when it's multimodal for natural ventilation and air conditioning. It's quite hot in Northern Australia, but when you open the whole building up, particularly in COVID, the doctor said to me today, he said, I can't thank you enough for letting this building breathe. He said for bacterial control, it's been fantastic. We could open all of the windows and doors up and get views of the mountains, and the breezes would rush through the building. He said, and it's working so well. So the way that we've designed the building is so that you get views of the landscape, you connect to the place. It is naturally ventilated if you want it to be, so people can feel the breeze over their body. And it just coincidentally works well in a COVID situation, which we didn't plan for that to happen, but that's happened. So the thing that you'll notice it's also got a lot of curved forms in it, which were requested by the client to deinstitutionalise it. It's got native endemic garden, which is designed by us, that includes local endemic plants and bush food plants and signal plants, and plants that the rangers gave us as gifts. Excuse me. And you'll see on the front of the facade, there's a design built into it, and that is part of the Gurriny water story. And that was designed by local artist, Philomena Yateman, who we'll show you pictures of in a minute. And when we went and worked with the local art centre and said, this is what we're making, we would love to have local artist involvement about the water story for Yarrabah, we didn't even have to talk to her for more than 5 minutes. Auntie Philomena, because she's, an Aboriginal elder woman, she knew exactly what she wanted to do and what was right for that place. And she created this incredible artwork that we were able to then translate onto the screen. And the community love it. And they understand the layers in it much more than we do. Sorry, I'm just going to have a drink. Did you want to make any comment on that? Yeah. And this is another picture of Uncle. Why these two are together is they know each other really well and they're good friends. And they're both in this image creating artwork and images of country. So Uncle's in the middle of painting a shield, which is actually about his traditional homeland near White Rock and where his father grew up. And Auntie Philomena's created, you know, a screen printable water story, which is about her country. And so there's all of this sort of layer of narrative and sense of place that's going on constantly with First Nations people in Australia that most people don't really understand, but then it's always connecting back with country. And there are ways that we can work together so that we can make better kind of urban places for people to use and utilise that celebrate community that people feel really comfortable and welcoming in. I've just got a tickle in my throat, sorry.
Have a drink, Shaneen. Now we've got more things we could show you, but that's probably time to let you ask questions, really. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I think I think it's however you do. We've got about another 20 minutes, so it could be good to open it out for discussion now if you feel comfortable with that. I mean,
Sure.
I'm not sure if you've got more slides of the building, at the inside the building, the rear of the building. It sounds really interesting in terms of the as you said, the deinstitutionalization that comes with making it more curved, the visibility across into the landscape around it. And I guess I've got a general question for everybody really about the kind of the translatability of these ideas into other contexts like in Europe or North America, other parts of the world. You know, what can we learn from this? But anyway, a few things there for you.
Oh no, while we were finding another image, Kel. So things that have come out of the making of this place, which this is the courtyard space at the back. It now has another sort of shade roof in a circular form, like the water story over the top of it. And through this place at the back, there was an opening ceremony with a smoking ceremony in it that everyone walked through the smoke at the opening of the building. These images are at the top of the inside of the space of the waiting area. And you can see in that slide of the courtyard how the water story comes through the building into the courtyard and through the etched concrete. And even the seat fabrics, Philomena's design, has been translated onto those. The building has also now been hung with a whole lot of artwork from the local art centre. So it's even further enriched with local, you know, iconography and artwork and meaning. And every time I go there, and I don't ask for this to occur, but what's been happening is that people have been stopping us and saying, the chairperson a few weeks ago was there, and he said he's had people come into the health clinic who haven't been in a clinic for 10 years, that they haven't seen them in a clinic for 10 years, and that they've come into this one because they feel comfortable in it. And all the staff want to work in it. And so there's, you know, because there's another centre a bit further away. And so it's the response to making a building that's kind of right for Yarrabah has been overwhelming in its support. And it kind of goes to show people often say, well, why don't you just make something, you know, purely functional about need, you know, rather than about connection to place. And it's a real demonstration to me of how you can, one, improve people's access to healthcare by creating a great place that connects to culture and country, and also that everyone deserves good design. There's also this can be a bit of a discriminatory level in Australia that, you know, only people who live in, you know, large urban centres deserve good design, you know, and that the rest of us have to put up with kind of the leftovers. But we're trying to demonstrate in this building that everyone deserves good places, aren't we, Uncle?
Well, most people get lifestyle choices, actually. And it'd be nice to actually get some lifestyle choices. for Aboriginal people. We've got some slides, Shaneen, of the connection to country views and things. Do you want me to flick through these?
Sure. So these are some of the key imperatives that we went through. We connect to country by, there are a lot of mountains behind the building, and when you crack the building open and create a courtyard, you get a view straight through the middle up to the kind of landscape beyond. It's through making a fully endemic native landscape of signal trees and plants that people recognise and that they can identify, whereas mostly a lot of Australia is full of imported plants from other places. And in terms of connection to country, plants are really important for people from a resource perspective, but also from a health perspective. Good bush tucker makes you well. The other thing that's really important is that because there are multiple clan groups and families and people have different rules about privacy, and there needed to be multiple places to wait. So different places that you could wait, not just one waiting area, so that you can choose how to respectfully wait and be away from somewhere. This also turned out to be a really good thing in a COVID circumstance because not everyone's squished together in one zone. So the building has performed really well under COVID in terms of providing service because it's so flexible. That's one of the other things. Are there more there, Kelly, in your little listing?
Yep.
No. Oh, yeah, and this is really important. So again, multiple entries and exits, more than you would normally get in any kind of commercial or health facility building, so that people have private, in a small community of 4,000 people, if you want to have a private counselling session with someone, you may not want to come through the front door. And so this building has multiple ways to get in it and move around it so that people can feel like their privacy is respected. And that you can escape out of the building as well if you're feeling uncomfortable or want to get away privately without other people seeing you, because it supplies counselling services, child assessment services, ophthalmology, audiology, regular vaccinations, family group counselling for different things, a bit of mental health. And so there's all sorts of things going on in this building. There was a need for it to be flexible to accommodate that.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. We've had a question from David Cantor about the planning process and how the design interfaced with planning and consent, and any constraints that there might have been on what you could do with the site, or how it might need to conform with statutory regulations in some way, particularly around healthcare settings. So I wonder if you could respond to that question, please.
Sure. It was federally funded in Australia, and which is different to the Queensland government state funding. And so it was under the Australasian Health Design Guidelines, and it complied with those and was reviewed by third parties on that ground. It was a little bit unusual in that it doesn't have, the polished concrete goes through all the reception areas and into the hallways, which is a bit unusual for a health setting, but it's all sealed and impervious, but there's vinyl in the sheet vinyl in the clinical spaces. It went through Yarrabah Aboriginal Shire Council, a separate planning process. It was code accessible because there was already an existing use on the site that was the same. So it was just a replacement of that use with a different size building. It is closer to the street. We had to get setback dispensations for that. I mean, these are all the kind of legislative things. In terms of community, it went through rigorous processes with the senior management team of the health facility, with a group of traditional custodian and elder women from Yarrabah, through the Gurriny Rangers, who reviewed it and then decided to gift a number of plants to the building, including that very important grass tree at the front. That's a whole other story, which is very funny, because you can't have a grass tree in Australia without a permit, and we were given one, and then I had to work out if we could actually have it. And then there was, and then also there was obviously permissions and art license agreements with the artists from the Art Centre. So one of the things this project has been really successful at, the other thing I've mentioned, it was built by a First Nations builder through a competitive procurement system, and the economic economic opportunities and outcomes for the local community because it was built by a First Nations builder are much higher than any other project I've worked on. They were massive. So we got more employment and training outcomes, 2 apprentices, more than $250,000 worth of investment into local Indigenous supply businesses. Yeah, it's been, in terms of economic opportunities, one of the best things we've worked on. So, I mean, we can always do better, but it's great. And the community really embraced that as well. And they loved the fact that it wasn't a local builder, but it was still an Aboriginal builder who was running the build with all of his team, you know. So I don't know if that answered the question very well.
David, was there anything else you wanted to include?
No, I mean, because what you described, many people would say that's the way all buildings should be created within a community. And I know from the past that even basic things like fire regulations can totally screw up what designers feel is right for the local people. And what seems to be so basic and impressive about your activity has been your ability to really manage that whole process, to engage with the local community and to follow through this huge bureaucratic activity that you just described. It always impresses me with architects often seem to imply that it's just a sort of natural thing that happens. But the real skill there is the management skill of actually effectively integrating with all of these processes.
I think the answer to that is, again, about relationships and the fact that I can text the CEO of the health organisation at 9 o'clock at night and say, oh, the builders think they have to move that important tree on the site. Who do we have to get permission from or talk to about that? And she will text me back, you know. So I think a lot of it is about this development of these very, everyone being on the same team, wanting to get the same, getting excited and inspired and wanting to get the best outcomes. And then if I don't know who I've got to talk to about, you know, a cultural issue, that I can either ask Uncle Peter or I can ask, you know, Sue, who's the boss of the organisation, and say, oh, this is a bit tricky. How do we work through this one, you know? So David, for me, the fact that again, it's this local thing because we're kind of here and we know each other so well. There's a lot of embedded trust and communication that goes on. That's quite direct, you know.
That side of it is enormously impressive. And of course, in many major projects, architects are brought in from the outside because of some sort of, say, international competition. And that completely negates the sort of issues that you're exploring.
That's true. I don't think I could do this on a project, you know, in the middle of an urban centre that I wasn't familiar with. I would struggle because I don't have those relationships. Having said that, I have a project in Brisbane that's going quite well, but it's because, you know, we spend a lot of time in the beginning just getting to know people, you know, and talking about where you're from and who's your family and, yeah, how you connect to country.
I was going to say, Shaneen, did you learn, I mean, some of these skills and that you're talking about, they're surely things you've learned from Aboriginal people, right? This is how Aboriginal people run stuff. They say, who are you? Where are you from? Who do you know? How do we connect? Do we like each other or do we not like each other? And you work all that out, right? And if you don't like each other, you have to work out who you're going to talk through to make sure you can fix that up a bit before you carry on, right? So I think there's a lot of these learnings from, I shouldn't say learnings, it's a terrible word, lessons from people like Uncle over time that probably help you to be a better architect.
They are, and there's when you're a non-Indigenous person trying to work in this field, there can be no rubbish. There's no interest, but people are going to use it in front. People see there's a very you have to be really straight because the bullshit filters are really high. You know, it's like, no, we don't trust them. They're not going to do the right thing. We don't believe them. They're just trying to spin us something. Sorry for swearing there. That was the best description I could give. So our approach is very straight, and I find that to be the approach that works pretty well. And there's also just that commitment to social justice and equity that people can see. And so you're working hard for everyone to get the best outcome, not just yourself. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. You get taught, I got taught how to listen and wait and share, Kelly, when I was doing my PhD in Arnhem Land back in the late 1990s. You know, that was one of the big things I learned, was how to be quiet and how to listen, wait, and to how to share. And to share, yeah.
But nonetheless, you have a particular style and approach to design. You obviously are offering ideas about what the building could be and how it might work. Because the great problem with most what used to be called advocacy planning or participative design and all those sorts of ideas that go way back to the 60s. The problem was that people who are not trained as architects and designers can't articulate what they want. And so finding a way to engage with people so that they can comment on and reflect on design ideas is itself a huge skill. But it requires you to offer ideas up, surely. You don't get them working with bits of balsa wood to sort of produce a design. You actually have ideas about the way it could be in relation to your understanding of them. And that's a very different process.
We do, but we also encourage ideas from the people we're working with. And it's amazing how many First Nations people I've met who have very good design and spatial ideas. It's like working with Auntie Philomena. I didn't actually have to do very much. Because she's such an experienced artist, we had a number of conversations, like 2, and then she went, here it is. And because she's a senior woman, I knew that there wouldn't be much negotiation on that, David, that was what was the correct answer and that we had to make that work. But we do kind of workshop stuff a lot. And so we say, well, is it heading in this direction? Does this sound, are we listening properly? And people, what I rely on people is for them to say, yes, that's pretty good, or no, it's not quite, no, it's not right yet, it's not right. And they'll talk about the vision and the aim and the country and the meaning. And that's the stuff that really helps us, right? There's a functional brief, but it's the visionary stuff, the atmospheric stuff that helps us to design it.
But how do you present it to them? I mean, in many design contexts, people who don't have training can't have difficulty making sense of a plan. I know if I'm trying to think about furniture arrangement with my wife, it's no use showing a plan of what it might look like. You've got to start mapping things out on the ground so she can see where the furniture would fit. And it is one of the skills architects develop, is how to conceive of a plan in 3 dimensions. So how do you express those architectural ideas with the people you're working with?
Well, we do a couple of different things. So for the spatial stuff, we start off with, we play games with bits of cardboard in participatory ways that are the right sort of shape and size. And then that helps us get the connections to landscape and views and functional planning. We do actually quite a lot of inspirational, I give everyone who I work with an inspirational precedent talk about, here are all of the, so sometimes expectations can be a little bit low because people haven't had the opportunity to experience or be in good design. And so part of what we do is we go, right, we can make a really great thing here. And here are all sorts of examples from across the world, you know, of and other First Nations projects in Australia of really interesting ideas of how people have made good places in remote or regional areas, you know, with First Nations people. What do you think about them? And it's amazing because people will immediately say, oh, that one's great, that's deadly, we love it, or nah, that's not, that's just silly, that one. You know, they will give you feedback. So we do use precedent images to get a sense of people's aesthetic and what they're interested in. We talk about places in community that already that they like as well. So what do you like here at the moment? What do you not like? What doesn't work for you? But then we do what everyone else does, David, and we create ideas in 3 dimensions and we present those ideas and we talk through them, you know, and then we tweak them, you know, design session after design
Thanks
session.
very much. Yeah, okay, thanks, Shaneen. I think we're running out of time, so I guess I just wanted to thank you all again on behalf of myself and everybody here, but maybe just offer you and Kelly and Uncle the opportunity to have any short closing remarks before we bring today's webinar to a conclusion.
Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Patrick.
Well, thank you, Patrick. Thanks, Shaneen, for having me, and Kelly and the other lady there, and the other brother there. Yeah, I'm getting use of everybody now from right around the world now.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us. Sorry for talking too much.
No, good. Fascinating, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Kelly, anything, last words from you?
Oh, not really. It's just that it's I suppose the relationship thing is interesting, you know, as well as Uncle having known Shaneen for a long time. Shaneen and I met on the first day of architecture school, and it's really interesting. We've had parallel interests in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture and design, but I've taken the academic route and she's taken the professional route. So it's really great to be able to share the kind of journey with her and meet friends like Uncle Peter along the way. So it's been a thrill to come along this evening to be able to talk to you all. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
You're very welcome. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think it turned out really well. It was we weren't quite sure what we were going to get a few days ago, but it's been absolutely brilliant. And I think you know, you've listed your contact details there on the slide. If anyone who listens into this afterwards or is present here today wants to follow up by contacting you all directly, I'm sure they can do that using email. And I'm sure there are lots of other supplementary materials and written reports and book chapters and all the rest of it, if people want to know a little bit more about the philosophy of design and the kind of skills that we've been discussing that are so important and really are part of good design everywhere, not just in the particular intercultural context that you're working in. So thank you all again. I just want to maybe invite Tara to close, my co-host today, but thank you very much on our behalf anyway. Wonderful.
Yes, I'd like to echo Patrick's thanks to all of our speakers. That was really fascinating. And I will just flag up the next talk in our series, which is happening in a month's time. It is titled Extractive Frontiers in the Sacrifice Zones of Ireland. So colleagues from Ireland, Patrick Bresnahan and Vincenza Serafis, excuse me, we'll be talking about the impact of the European Green Deal and the focus on renewable energy on rural communities. Excuse me, now I have something in my throat, Shaneen. Rural communities and places in Ireland. So that looks to be another exciting and interesting talk. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. And with that, I'll invite everyone to say goodbye to each other, and I'll play some music on our way out of the call, and just for the speakers to hold on so we can have a 5-minute debrief after the end. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Thank you. Still there. That's right. Your rainbow. I've got name jealousy.
I've got a rainbow. You can't really see it, but I've got a rainbow cat badge. It's a bit worn out. I wore it because I thought
I was wondering about that badge and what the badge means. It looked like a cat